Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Arts and Environmental Justice Symposium hosted by the Mural Arts Institute at Mural Arts Philadelphia. My name is Sapide Mosenyan Rahman. I'm a manager at the Institute working at the intersection of arts and environmental justice. I'm a brown woman with brown eyes, brown short hair, sitting in front of a gray wall with art that's really important to me. I'm wearing a black shirt as means of an access statement. So grateful that everyone is here with us today to go through this implosion, this live interactive implosion demonstration that will be hosted by Trash Academy, titled Practicing Environmental Justice for a More Just Future. Before I go into introducing our Trash Academy colleagues, I want to do a brief land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land on which we live and labor were stolen from the Lenni Lenape peoples and their descendants who survived and remained in the homeland, in addition to those in the diaspora who were forcefully removed as far as Oklahoma, Wisconsin, and Canada, and are still marginalized even in the city of brotherly love. Registration to the symposium was free, but please find links to the tribal governments and indigenous organizations on Lenape land, Philadelphia, in the chat, and consider donating and learning more in the spirit of reciprocity and reparations. And in sharing more about the implosion, I wanted to share that it's a creative participatory research tool used for building coalitions and exposing the hidden connections that fuel systems of environmental injustice. It is so fun and a pleasure every time I get to witness or participate in one. And we have Trash Academy to thank for bringing that practice to Mural Arts. A little bit about Trash Academy. Earning at the title of Philadelphia, the trash and litter that defaces the streets of our city is an apt metaphor for the systematic devaluation of underserved communities. Litter is both an environmental and racial justice issue, disproportionately affecting Black and Brown communities. In reaction to this pervasive injustice, Trash Academy, a project of Mural Arts Philadelphia's Environmental Justice Department, activates an intergenerational collaboratory led by artists, activists, organizers, nonprofits, local government, and engaged residents of diverse backgrounds. Collectively, Trash Academy designs projects that complicate the issue of trash and deepen people's understanding of litter, consumption, and waste, and shifts attitudes from passive acceptance to proactive responses to the waste stream. Trash Academy projects support EJ movement building through the innovative, creative methodologies like really fun group activities and games, participatory research, teach-ins, workshops, and 3 trash mobiles used to provide on-site art and creativity studios at neighborhood events and locales. Trash Academy embraces the tenet of environmental justice that people who are most impacted by environmental harm are the ones best positioned to create solutions. And Trash Academy positions participants as leaders of its interventions, mentoring participants to become environmental activists, advocates, and public speakers at teach-ins, citywide events, and demonstrations. Now in its 5th year, Trash Academy invigorates public spaces and shifts attitudes in some of the city's most litter-strewn neighborhoods. Trash Academy uses arts-based social practice, like this one, to pursue these goals. Deepen people's perspectives by complicating the issue of trash, use games, participatory research, and other fun, interactive points of entry, design projects and interventions to shift attitudes and prompt collective action around environmental justice, develop member leadership skills through public speaking and presenting, game facilitation, and knowledge sharing. And last, but certainly not least, supporting the environmental justice movement and movement building. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm going to pass the mic over to our Trash Academy partners.
Now I'm unmuted. Thank you. So thank you, Sepide, for that introduction. My name is Ron. I am an organizer with Trash Academy, and I'd like to welcome you to our workshop, Learning Together for a More Just Future. We will be modeling our live interactive implosion for you after we do a little bit of knowledge sharing. And next, I'd like to pass it to Emma, who will share the agenda for today.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, in this first little bit of time, we will be drawing an object or waste item that disturbs us the most. We'll get into that warm-up activity in just a second. Then we'll take about 10 to 15 minutes to do an introductory presentation. We'll be discussing more deeply how the implosion activity can be used as a tool for activating networks to discover the complex interconnections and relationships inherent in our everyday life and practices. Then for 5 minutes, we'll answer a poll and select the object that will implode live together. And then we will go into breakout rooms to discuss each of the dimensions that are within an implosion. We'll take about 40 minutes to report out from those breakout groups and draw the results of the research that we've done together. And then in the last 10 minutes, we'll reflect and answer some questions together. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so for our warm-up activity, Margaret is going to drop in the chat a sketch together link. This link will be used in order for us to draw together. You should be able to click on the link directly. It should bring you to a sketchbook app where you can see everybody drawing. We're asking you to take about a minute or two to draw the piece of waste that most disturbs you. You're seeing a lot of disposable masks, plastic water bottles and plastic clamshells, single-use anything, plastic bag. Great, maybe another couple seconds to finish up your drawings. Okay, Margaret's going to take a second to screen share what we all drew together so we can see it. We've got a lot of single-use plastics in there. Some PPE, seeing a lot of that recently. Plastic water bottles, which we'll get more into detail in the future. Some plastic trash bags, plastic waste. Super nice. Nice. Okay, so we'll take a second to introduce ourselves now. My name is Emma. I'm a project manager in the Environmental Justice Department. I am Chinese American, wearing a black t-shirt. My hair is in a bun, and I'm just sitting in front of a blank wall, and I'll be helping facilitate the session today.
Okay, my name is Ron White. I've been with Trash Academy since 2016. I am the project coordinator and Black guy here from Philadelphia wearing a Trash Academy t-shirt. And thank you for being here.
I'm Shari Hirsch. I'm white. I'm like a hallway, a kind of empty hallway with crap in it behind me. I'm wearing a gray Trash Academy t-shirt, very short hair, little square dangling earrings.
Hi, I'm Margaret Carney. I'm an artist with Trash Academy and have been part of Trash Academy since 2016. I'm a white woman with red hair wearing a gray Trash Academy t-shirt sitting in front of a wall of shelves of art supplies.
Great. So we'll just take a second to talk about the Environmental Justice Department, which is a department within Mural Arts Philadelphia. In an effort to rectify and activate around environmental justice issues, the Environmental Justice Department facilitates projects that come directly from communities, centering their visions, expertise, and knowledge. Environmental hazards disproportionately affect marginalized communities, especially communities of color. So to imagine and practice a more just future, projects must prioritize dismantling the systems that maintain these disparities and build relational networks both in their goals and practice. So this is something that we will practice together today.
And the Environmental Justice Department at Mural Arts grew out of the work of Trash Academy. And Trash Academy's philosophy is all about complicating the issue of trash and taking it beyond a personal consumption issue and looking at the systemic issues that are behind the trash and litter on our streets and our waterways, and the microplastics now coming down from the sky as well. So we have a whole lot of challenges when it comes to trash. At Trash Academy, we've been very successful with community outreach, and also we've been working on the plastic bag ban that's recently been implemented. And next slide, please. Our point of entry is usually almost always fun, creativity, especially when we're dealing with such a drab and issue of trash that people are like, oh, trash is icky, nasty. They don't often want to engage with it. So we use art and creativity as a way of helping people to engage with this issue. Next slide, please. And we're also all about youth development and leadership development. Here you can see a few of our Trash Academy members who have been engaged with the recent climate change protests, and they organically gravitated towards this through their work with Trash Academy. We did not push them towards this activism, but through their work and education at Trash Academy, they really became activated and are now on the way to being climate change activists. Next slide, please. So here at Trash Academy, we are existing at the intersection of environmental justice and environmentalism. And traditionally, environmentalism has been the focus of the green movement and of the mainstream environmental movement, focusing mostly on conservation, sustainability, protecting wildlife. And while we realize that these things are very important, we also cannot ignore racial justice, social justice, frontline communities. So that's why we are trying to incorporate all of these things in our practice, not just focus on one or the other.
Yeah, so as Ron described at Trash Academy, one of our primary goals is to complicate the seemingly simple and straightforward issue of trash. Understanding, unpacking, and analyzing complex systems is a fundamental part of our practice. And towards those ends, this implosion method that we'll practice together today has been really valuable. The implosion activity is a tool that activates networks by discovering the complex interconnections and relationships inherent in our life and practices. So in this session, we'll work together to uncover the economic and political systems at work within seemingly simple objects in order to dismantle the corrupt systems and corporations that benefit from this concealment and kind of secrecy. It is essential for us to understand and realize our interconnectedness, and this practice is an accessible tool to help us dive deeper past the camouflage of globalization and capitalism and understand how environmental justice movements can be made more powerful through collective knowledge building and recognition of our interrelatedness. So I just want to highlight that important aspect of the implosion is the collective learning. The depth and meaning of the discoveries and the importance of learning this information together has been so transformative for us. And I hope that's something that you experience as well as we practice this together.
And so we like to
After
focus.
COVID, Trash Academy pivoted towards these implosions. It was a huge change to transform our practice from in-person gameplay to kind of this more virtual project. In this past spring, we imploded Charmin toilet paper, which you can see to the right as a result of the pandemic-induced panic buying. And we also imploded single-use plastic bags, which you can see on the left, as a continuation of our campaign to ban these single-use plastics being distributed in Philly. So we're going to talk about some of the discoveries we made through this plastic bag implosion and the ways that we've been able to use this tool to discover hidden connections and build and activate networks around interconnected issues. In particular, the implosion walks you through a number of questions in various dimensions, and we'll go through those dimensions together in our breakout groups, including political dimensions, the economic dimension, the material dimension of an object, etc.
All right, thanks, Emma. And going a little bit deeper into the implosion on the next slide, we really focused on plastic bags. And the more we learned, the more shocked we became to understand how intricately the fossil fuel industry is connected with plastics, and how much this industry is subsidized by the federal government as well. On the next slide, it just is zooming in and showing us some of the corporations that are behind plastics, some of the infrastructure that is behind fracking. For example, Pennsylvania is really big here in fracking, and a lot of people don't realize that fracking is where we get a lot of our plastics from, a lot of our single-use plastics. So this is something that came out of our implosion and information that we're trying to share with people as well. Why does this matter for Philadelphia? On the next slide, we can see that Philadelphia is facing a crisis with our trash system, especially the fact that recycling and trash are being mixed together and not separated. And this crisis originated, you can see on the next slide, when China decided to stop importing our plastic waste. So that threw our recycling and trash systems into a tailspin, because we were just used to just exporting all of our waste somewhere else. And now we were forced to deal with it ourselves. And what's actually happening, you can see on the next slide, is that a large percentage of our trash and recycling is now being burned, incinerated. So in Chester, PA, about 45 minutes from Philadelphia, there's the largest trash incineration facility in the country, located in a mostly Black and brown neighborhood. And this is where most of Philadelphia's trash is being incinerated, and it's leading to an environmental justice disaster for this area. People are suffering from cancers, asthma, disruptions to the neighborhood from trucks bringing trash constantly, lowering of their property values. And it's really, well, I'll pass it to Emma to talk more about how the implosion reveals what's happening here.
Yeah, using the implosion, we were able to really dive deeply into the interconnected relationships between the globalization and the use of our plastics and where they come from. So that's something that we will practice together as well in breakout groups, is as we go through the questions within our dimensions, we'll get to uncover together, discover together the ways that our consumption is related to a bunch of systems that you can't see on the surface when you just look at the object.
Right, and speaking about globalization, on the next slide, we can see where our plastic is being exported to. And this is environmental racism on a global scale. So we can see that most of the plastics being generated are coming, the top plastic exporters are, wealthy, mostly white countries or upper income countries. And most of the places that are receiving or importing plastic waste are places like Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam. And this is leading to an environmental disaster in these countries as well. So the trash issue is not just local, it's also global.
Yeah, and you can see on the next slide, not only does the implosion help us discover the interconnected relations and the global efforts, but we can also use the implosion to implode things that are not objects. For example, Trash Academy did a project where we imploded the relationship between COVID-19 and climate change through a series of dimensions. And created a kind of a series of posters and a website. So we'll share that website with you in the chat. And you can look through the whole dimension if you'd like to. And if you have a blank wall, we are also looking to post these posters in new places. So we'll give you the booking form for that as well at the end of the presentation. Okay, so on the next slide, we are now in our stage where we're going to select the object that we will be imploding together in this session. You can see on the left that there are 3 objects here, either a Champion t-shirt, a Starbucks coffee cup, or an Arrowhead plastic water bottle. Please click the item on the poll for the object that you prefer for us all to implode together in this workshop. Just a couple more folks. And I think we can call it there because 12 votes is the winner. So we will be imploding the Starbucks coffee cup. Great, so we can move on to the next slide. We will be imploding the Starbucks coffee cup together in our session. So in order to build the collective research for this object, we'll be splitting into 8 breakout groups. Each group has a different dimension and each dimension should designate 1 note taker and 1 reporter, somebody who will report back when we come back to the big group about the information that you found. When you're in the breakout group, we'll send out the link to the Google Doc with the dimension questions. You can take the notes directly in that Google document, and you should go to the page designated by your group number. So for example, if you get group 1, you should go into the document and click on group 1 and answer the questions for group 1. If you're in group 2, you should click on group 2 and respond to the second dimension, etc. For any fact you provide, please make sure that you try and source that fact at least twice. So again, we'll be breaking into 8 breakout groups. Each breakout group will get a separate dimension. And in that breakout group, please designate 1 note taker and 1 reporter. Hey folks. Okay, Victoria, if it's possible to set the text settings so people can now mute and unmute themselves, that would
They
be
have
really
that permission.
great. Thanks. Okay, so now we're going to go dimension by dimension. We'll ask that the person who was designated as the report out person is the person who shares per dimension. So while you're speaking, Margaret and Shari will be drawing what you're illustrating, and you'll be able to see it on your screen. So if you could try not to speak too fast, try to speak pretty slowly, go through the points pretty slowly so you don't get too ahead of the illustrations. And if you notice that you said anything that's missing from the illustration, feel free to point it out. We're also trying to use this opportunity as a way to access the intelligence in the room. So normally if we were in person, you could kind of call out and say like, oh, what about also this? And we know there are a lot of people in this room who are doing work around environmental justice. So we are asking that because Zoom is a little bit more of a process to get to this, that we're really do welcome you to if you have any additional facts, any additional comments, to use the chat as a place to build that kind of collective knowledge in the room so that we really are sourcing all of the intelligence for this implosion in the room. And there will be someone, a facilitator, who is reading out from the chat to make sure that there are that everything that is in the chat is also included in the illustration. And of course, this implosion won't be entirely complete. We won't make all the connections that exist. We were only in our breakout rooms for 15 minutes, so we'll just get as much of the implosion drawn as we can. So I will share my screen so we can start with that Miro board. Okay. Oh, I see the context and situatedness situated around that Starbucks cup already. So yeah, we'll start with this context and situatedness dimension, and then we'll be moving clockwise around the dimensions just so you can anticipate when you will be speaking. And if it's possible for someone to copy paste the dimension questions again into the chat, just so folks can open up the notes on their own screen if they're the reporter, that would be helpful. Thank you so much. Okay, so we can start with context and situatedness, which was actually my group. But I think Ryan is going to do the report out for this.
Thank you, Emma. And I am loading our page right now. Bear with me for just a moment, please. All right. And then Emma, I'm sorry, quick question. Where can I see our responses?
I think it's on page 2 under room 1, where it says context and situatedness.
Under room 1. Okay, page 2. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still loading, but I promise I'll report.
No worries. If it would be helpful, I can read. I think the first fact was that the United States has the most Starbuckses with 15,000 locations. And then there's a huge drop off after that. After the United States, the next most Starbucks filled country is China with something like 4,000 Starbuckses. And then third is Canada with like 1,000 Starbuckses. So the United States is really the lead on Starbucks locations.
Yeah, and then Emma broke it down because the United States was far and beyond the largest location for Starbucks. Emma broke it down by geography. So California has nearly 20% of all Starbucks locations, whereas Vermont has the fewest locations. And then we answered the question of how does it appear and next to what or in what? So Starbucks is often found nowadays. So typically Starbucks was its own storefront and its own business, but now it is merging with partners. So now you can see it in Targets, Safeways, Ralph's, or other grocery stores that you may have near you, perhaps a Kroger or whatever else is going on. And then also Starbucks is moving into suburban areas. Most new stores in 2021 were located in the suburbs as opposed to city centers. So this can be an expression of going where there's extra money, going where there's disposable income. Our next question, I want to be cognizant of being slow. Our next question was, what activities or ways of life enable one to come across a Starbucks? And then Emma and I talked about it's quick-paced. It's for people who are on the go, on the way to work, on the way to some event. It's convenience-oriented. So it's about the folks who don't think they have enough time to make a pot at home, grab a to-go cup. It's for those people who that's not necessarily their priorities. The priority is to spend money for that convenience. Also, it comes to the point of people carrying around their Starbucks cup because it conveys a certain perception about that drinker, right? They're hip, they're on the go, they're, exciting. Our next question was, what kind of audiences is it addressed to? So Starbucks primary customers consist of men and women ages 25 to 40 who are hip, contemporary, and willing to shell out a few extra dollars for a specialty drink, of which Starbucks accounts for 75% of their sales through specialty drinks. Think about that pumpkin spice latte, right? And so this led Emma and I into a discussion about the folks who would maybe go to McDonald's for that 99-cent McCafe versus Starbucks for the $4, $5, $6 drink, right? And it got us thinking about expressing individuality because you can have these specialty drinks at Starbucks. The interest in individuality, the interest in something more specialized than just coffee. And then so that led into our next question: who is excluded in these addresses? So we thought about the opposite of who their specific targeted group is. We thought about budget conscious folks, or people who are not necessarily time conscious, right? If you're not so specifically time conscious, you might not need to have that convenience of a drive-through drink. You may be more willing to make it at home. So I didn't want to necessarily pigeonhole it as people who don't drink Starbucks aren't hip, but Starbucks is certainly thinking that a lot of their market is hip. And so people who might go to McDonald's, Starbucks might not think they're as hip, but that's not to be determined. The final questions we were just starting to get into as the time was running up. When can it appear? When can Starbucks appear? So typically Starbucks is busiest in the morning on that morning commute, and then maybe after school, some after school kids. What is the rhythm of its appearance? Typically it's in neighborhoods and communities that typically have residents who have disposable income, or communities that are trying to look a certain type of way. And then how does this matter? So Starbucks is trying to maintain their target audience and maintain this idea of hipness. And so what matters is that Starbucks is staying in certain neighborhoods because that's where they think their income will be, their profit will be. This led us into the discussion of what people used to call food deserts, but now we're trying to turn it. When thinking about communities that do have access to convenient foods, specialized foods, we think about where do we see Starbucks, where do we not? And it all ties together. And that is the end of our question. So thank you, Emma.
All right, I think I'm next with material dimension. So we focus mostly on the economic dimension, but I do want to touch on these other ones just off the top of my head. I kind of know some of this already. So what materials were involved in its production and maintenance? Mostly paper for the cups. We also have this plastic coating on the inside of the cups as well, which is a problem because that often prevents them from being recycled. Then there's a plastic lid. And there's often been plastic straws associated with Starbucks cups, but they're trying to phase those out. But I think you'll still see a lot of plastic straws in most Starbucks today. So where have these materials come from? It's a big problem that a lot of Starbucks, Starbucks gets a lot of their materials from palm oil from Southeast Asian rainforests. And this is a big problem because obviously they're chopping down the rainforest to grow this palm oil because it's more profitable than the rainforest for them. And it's affecting wildlife. It's generating a toxic haze when they burn the rainforest to make room for this palm oil crops. Deforestation also comes into play when they are sourcing the materials for their paper, for the cups. And this happens in Southeast Asia as well. And the last question for material dimension is how are they disposed of? Usually they're dumped in the trash, they go straight to landfill. We do have, they are testing some compostable Starbucks cups now. So some of them can be, a small percentage of them can be composted. and the ones that don't have the plastic coating can be recycled. And that's all for the material dimension. Yeah, Ryan says he's heard that they're testing out returning your cups for reuse, so hopefully that takes off.
Okay, I think historical is next, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
It was Sherry and Mary Jo and I, but I can read some of our notes when the artists move down there. Okay, looks like the artists are ready. Thanks. We had the first question as what concepts refer to it. And we ended up thinking a little bit more about the physical cup. So the concept of having a disposable cup was something that was new in the 20th century in the beginning. There were some disputed dates of the invention, but essentially around 1907, it may have been invented by Lawrence Llewellyn, who's a Boston inventor concerned with disease, and the Spanish flu in 1918 made this a more common concern. Before this, the concepts of items had more to do with just using it until it would break and maybe repairing it. But at this stage, people wanted to be able to use something once and not have anyone else touch it concerning germs, right? So then it would be disposed. And that was a paper cup. There's no discussion of lining until later. We don't know, we couldn't track back the polyethylene lining to a date, but there was the desire to create something that could hold a hotter liquid like coffee. So 1936, Walter W. Cecil made a paper cup with handles. And more inventions in 1953 about aestheticizing this invention, with Leslie Buck's introduction of blue and white or bronze lettering. That was something that we read about. So there is this concept of like making it something that's more than just the plain paper cup. And that comes in together with Starbucks identity later. So there were other inventions like foam and everything like styrofoam in the 60s, but in 1980s is when Starbucks came along in 1987. And Starbucks chose not to use foam, but paper. So we're really getting into questions of like, was it invented by whom actually? But that's how it is. And who tells these histories as well, because Starbucks is the main reporter sort of what Starbucks uses. And it's hard to find information on when they decided to use plastic lining, even though there are lots of articles about the fact that they have. And then if you look up today, you know, polyethylene Starbucks lining, the articles that come up at the very top are positive publicity for Starbucks sharing about their initiatives, their green initiative to launch more recyclable cups, but it only happened in a few cities so far, and that might have been 2018, 2019. So the impact is very minimal. Wow, that's what's coming up at the top of the search. So it's really the corporation for profit taking control over the reporting of the journalism around this story. How has it traveled historically? We didn't get to that. How does this matter? It matters because
this is something that we take for granted and don't question the history of, I think, in our like lifestyle in the United States, in suburban and urban settings. So we do just hear the main history being told by these corporations most of the time, unless we get together for activism like this. That was all from us, I think.
Okay, and next we did the economic dimension. I don't know if the person who was in my breakout room wants to, report back, or I could do it either way.
We're doing the economic dimension next, yeah?
Yes.
I can actually start the report out. I'd ask others in our group to help out if they could. For the economic dimensions, the first question, the process as a commodity, how is it marketed, purchased, consumed, where and by whom? And marketed across platforms. The cup is a single branded, single use, and imagined as disposable or recyclable. The research that we had, Starbucks has tried to be greener in their cups. They actually had a program to just before the pandemic to bring in your own cup. They've tried to use post-consumer content in their cups. They've just recently started a program where you get a cup, you have put a deposit on the cup. If you bring back the cup, you get a 10% discount. That's some of their strategies to make the process, the commodity process, recyclable. And in terms of marketing, back in June of last year, because of a lot of the controversy that Starbucks has had in public media, and particularly social media, they suspended kind of advertising on all social media platforms. Would anyone in our group want to speak to the next note?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Craig. So, we were talking, or I heard some of the other groups share out about where these Starbucks are located, 15,000 in the United States, most in affluent suburbs. And you start thinking about who is using Starbucks, who's comfortable in these spaces. And also being in Philly, we know that there's this carceral dimension that Starbucks has been playing in urban spaces as well, where a few years ago, right, some Starbucks employees called the cops on two Black customers for really no reason at all. And we're seeing that more and more in just spaces that we all occupy. And so I linked a Vox article explaining that in the notes. And I feel like the connection between corporate spaces and the cops and carceral settings is always really interesting. Like, who is welcome in these spaces, who is going to be given the benefit of the doubt, who is going to be policed. There's a really great study actually that I can drop in the chat about COVID-19 and policing, and in what spaces and whom more people are approached by police for various reasons. Let's see. And then the next question is, how is it involved in a world marketplace? Do you want to take that one, Craig?
Sure. We weren't able to find recent data. The data we had is like 7 years ago. on the volume in the marketplace, the number of cups, specific cups. But we did get the data, on the number of drinks per day, and we're assuming each drink would probably be a cup. So 4 million drinks a day, which works out to about 1.5 billion cups a year. So we could probably use, if we wanted a statistic, to talk about the number of cups that are a part of the use and waste, and in general, not in the recycling stream. It would be 1.5 billion. We found a report from Harvard University, from the business school. It was just an overall case analysis of Starbucks Corporation. What's most interesting in the report is to see the other beverage and drink and associated companies that Starbucks has acquired, including was it Tazo, T-A-Z-O, teas, which people may be familiar with. And the business model for Starbucks is that they own and manage all of their stores directly. They don't have a franchise business structure where someone purchased a franchise from the company and then sells it, like McDonald's and many of the other fast food, fast beverage companies do. Over the last 10 years, they've gone through a couple of business crises in which the founder left and then came back, tried to reestablish credit, and they've had a number of labor relations challenges as well.
All right, thanks. And also the one question, who sells it? So in the stores, and in their actual stores, mostly low-wage part-time workers. I'm not sure what the actual wage is for most workers right now, but I think they raised it a little bit. But most of these people are part-time without a lot of benefits, so that's not good. Also, on a higher level, who is selling it are obviously the advertisers, marketing specialists, graphic designers, and corporate executives. It's also people, I think I forgot this myself, but you can buy Starbucks. They sell Starbucks coffee in all different sorts of places outside of the main stores. So you can buy Starbucks coffee at 7-Eleven, Wawa, Walmart, like any convenience stores. You can even buy them on Amazon. The market is saturated with these products, and this is probably why in 2021 Starbucks net worth was 110 billion. So they're making a lot of money off these products. And let me see if there's anything else we forgot here. Unfortunately, there's also a child labor dimension to this.
Ron, did you say 110 billion a year?
Yes, 110 billion in 2021. Yeah, that's their
Thank you.
And as far as the labor, the child labor, and this is to the question of who is involved at each stage, of the economics of this product. They have child laborers, picking the coffee beans. Child laborers as young as 8 years old are picking coffee beans. Let me see exactly where this is happening at. This is in Guatemala. And this was exposed in 2020. So we know the challenges that Guatemala is facing, and it seems that Starbucks is taking advantage of that by having child laborers working 40-hour weeks in grueling conditions, picking coffee beans for little more than the price of a latte.
Mhm.
And I think we should end it there to give time for other people.
Great. I think the next dimension is bodily organic, but maybe we can give the artist just a second to catch up.
Do you want us to jump in for room 6 now, or? Okay, I'll just go. We were kind of ran out of time, but we got to most of the questions. So how are bodies related to it? I mean, obviously you need bodies to run the equipment, to make the cup, to package it, etc., and ship it out to where it needs to go. What forms of attention, affect, emotion, and cognition are involved. It's pretty famous, especially because it's a global or worldwide chain. It's something that can be everywhere but nowhere at the same time. And due to it being highly visible, it helps to pull on your emotions as a consumer, to push you to buy a product just for the logo. And then also, like, it's a non-local object. So it's not just a thing in your hand, but it's also like a part of a company that, like, it's not really localized. Like, I don't think most people realize that it started in, I think, Seattle, or somewhere over to the west of the US. So when you think of Starbucks, you just think of Starbucks, not necessarily like a location. Are there particular ways in which we think of ourselves that also involve or sustain this process? The cup is very trendy. And I was saying that I felt like the cup is exclusive because it's not inclusive. Like, to some people, Starbucks is normal, but in certain neighborhoods, it's not present at all unless it's on like a college campus, right? So if we like think about North Philly in particular, which is, I don't live there now, but it's where I grew up. You can find a Starbucks on Temple's campus, I believe. But if you were to walk around the neighborhood, certainly if you were to go to 23rd and Diamond, where I'm from, you would not find a Starbucks there whatsoever. So it creates like this sort of air of exclusivity, and that creates sustainability for Starbucks, because not everybody has access to it. So that makes people want to get it even more. What kinds of bodies, including non-humans and bodily relations, are involved in producing it? And then what kinds make use of it? So Starbucks cups are manufactured throughout the world. It really just depends on where everything is. I know that I saw that there are plants in like the US and the UK, but in other places as well. And there are many different bodies that produce the cups: Black, white, Latino, Indigenous. And I put maybe child labor because when I researched, Starbucks had actually released a statement about the documentary saying that they have a zero tolerance policy. for child labor, in that they looked into the companies that were included in the documentary and they did not purchase any coffee from them. So that's why I put the question mark there, because they say they have a zero tolerance policy, and that thus far, whenever they get a claim, they investigate it to the fullest extent. And again, Starbucks cannot really be found in inner city communities where the majority of the neighborhood could be described as Black, Indigenous, or people of color. I don't think there are Starbucks on any other reservations in the United States. Therefore, the typical bodies that make use of Starbucks are white suburbanites or inner city middle to upper class folks. How are these bodies in relations gendered? I mean, some of the folks who work in the manufacturing centers are men and women. And we really didn't get a chance to get to the other sections to do any research on like what is the makeup of like the workers and the folks that are in the manufacturing spaces.
If I could just add like to the non-local thing, like it's just that way when an object is like it's not unique and it's just a copy and it's like unquantifiable how many. I meant more like just the cup than the franchise than Starbucks or the logo, like just the physical cup. Like if it's one that's exactly the same as a billion cups and you don't know where they are, you know, when you use it, like you can kind of throw it out and feel like it's kind of been deleted from existence, because it's not, if it's like a unique object, you would think about where it's going and everything. But if it's kind of one of a multitude and you have no idea where all they are and they all kind of represent one of the same thing, it's easier to kind of forget when you're done using it.
Thanks for that comment, Brian. I think the next dimension is the political dimension. If we can just give the artists one more second. I also want to note to the artists that it seems like your drawings are getting progressively larger as you move through the dimensions. So you might want to zoom in a little bit more as you draw the next one.
All right, political dimension. We didn't get a chance to do a lot on this one, but I think there's a few important things to mention, like the fact that in 2020, Starbucks spent $1,110,000 on lobbying efforts, and this was geared mostly towards like there's a food and beverage industry that's connected with Congress, and it's not exactly clear like where this money was going, but obviously it's to support their continued efforts to continue operating the way they are right now. So all the negative things that we have been mentioning, I'm pretty sure this lobbying is to make sure.
Say that number again, Ron?
1,110,000. Yeah, that's how much they spent in 2020 on lobbying. But we need to do more research to find out exactly how that money, where that money is going to, which Congress people or whatever are getting it. There's also this issue of Starbucks being, at least in the public perception, skewed towards Democrats or skewed towards liberal people. One of the reasons for this is because you know, they changed the art or the labels on their coffee cups to say Happy Holidays instead of Merry Christmas, and that was a big problem for a lot of conservatives. That gave them a lot of backlash. Trump people started boycotting. Trump supporters started boycotting Starbucks last year because I think in response to an incident that Sepide mentioned, there were some workers in the store that asked some police officers to leave because other people didn't feel safe. And then once that got out, Trump supporters decided to start, you know, oh yeah, Marta said that someone in their group did economic. So wait, did you say economic or political, Marta? Look at the chat again, sorry.
We did political.
Oh, great. So if you want to chime in, because you probably did more than I did. So please take it away.
Marta, you want to start? I just did put some stuff in chat to you because I thought you were reporting, or sorry, maybe I was wrong about that.
Yeah, you might have got a little bit jumbled up, but I think it's fine as long as we get that info out there.
Okay, my name's Nicole. Longish red hair and in a black dark outfit, and I'm just calling attention to a few class action lawsuits, and one of them being just the drink size gets bigger, but the caffeine doesn't. And that was 2020. There's also where did it go? Oh, the 2017 Trump executive order to indefinitely suspend entry to Syrian refugees to the U.S. resulted in Starbucks CEO writing that they've developed plans to hire 10,000 refugees over 5 years in 75 countries, which in turn resulted in Trump supporters boycotting Starbucks, asking Starbucks to give more help to American veterans. And now Starbucks has got a plan for that, hiring a certain number of U.S. veterans. Also 2012, Brew Not Bullets boycott of Starbucks happened until they changed their policy of allowing open carry of guns in their stores. In 2013, the founder asked customers to not bring guns into Starbucks, but didn't ban guns. And there's earlier stuff about, there's more marketing, but Ethiopian coffee, the monopoly Starbucks had on Ethiopian coffee not fitting the requirements for fair trade. And in 2007, Starbucks and the government of Ethiopia signed a licensing, distribution, and marketing agreement, allowing farmer co-ops to earn more and enable growers more share of the retail price. But I didn't find anything following up on that or opposing viewpoints on that. So there's probably a lot. There is a lot more. Also, the baristas have launched a lawsuit, class action, alleging that granting shift supervisors a portion of tips violates state labor laws. And the company planned to appeal that. And I don't know the follow-up on that. Do the two of you have others from my group? Other points to share?
Good, thank you so much for your contributions. Last up, we have the symbolic dimension. I would ask if the symbolic dimension would mind maybe sticking to their most pertinent points, just so we make sure we have enough time to look at the implosion as a whole. That would be great.
This is Constance. I took notes, which I'm not finding right now. So if Marcus or Oscar, or I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the other woman who was with us, wouldn't mind taking over, that would be great.
Sure, I'll say this is Oscar Garza, and Marcus, you can jump in there, but we didn't get very far down in there, but my recollection, we were talking about the symbolism. Well, I guess I'd said that. So symbolically, and if I'm getting the question correctly here, at least for me anyway, symbolically, it represents, somebody having a cup of Starbucks, somebody more affluent, and also more socially conscious, are a couple of symbolism that comes to mind for me. Marcus, you want to jump in there and say anything on that? There was one other one, I can't remember what it was.
No, I don't have much to add. I think I was just thinking along the lines of it being a symbol for a multinational behemoth, pushing out local traditions, local beverages, and local businesses. So just mostly along those lines.
And this is Constance. I just found notes. One of the things we talked about was the reliability of the brand, that it symbolizes something that would be the same no matter where you got it. I actually live in the area where Starbucks started, and mentioned that Starbucks has created kind of its own cult, that the original store, and I think this is people wanting to understand maybe history and place, which has come up through all of this. The original store is in an open market in Seattle, and it is constantly ringed by people who want to go in and buy coffee at the original store and take their pictures with the original logo, which isn't used anymore. So it's kind of created its own culture.
Thanks, Constance. Okay, I'm going to zoom out now so we can see the whole implosion as a whole. So typically how the process works at this point is after the drawing has been kind of maneuvered, some of the pieces will be moved around. We sit and look at it and try and draw connections between things that are popping up in multiple dimensions. Because in the interest of time, we have about 7 minutes. I think we should try and draw out the most obvious connections for the next 2 minutes. I would ask that you guys just take yourself off mute if you see something that is appearing in multiple dimensions that you heard multiple times, so we can make sure to draw those connections between the dimensions. And then we'll take the last few minutes just to do a quick debrief and reflection in the chat. So if you see or remember any connections, things you heard a couple times, feel free to take yourself off mute.
Affluent.
Affluent, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I see that coming up in the economic, in the bodily organic, also in the context.
There's a real transnational component to it. You know, when I think of like coffee, I think of like a cup of joe as a very like, that kind of coffee is a very American thing, but having it linked to such a global trade is always interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for sharing, Sepide. Maybe we'll take one more before we transition into the debrief. Any other connections that you guys can see?
About the inequity. It's in a sense a luxury product that causes a lot of suffering and injustice.
Yeah, definitely. That came up again and again in almost every dimension. Thanks for sharing, Craig.
I just put in expansion, getting bigger really fast as possible. Seems like a through line.
Definitely, expansion's a big one. Thanks for sharing.
And the tension too between the customizability and how important that is kind of to the brand value, and then at the same time the reproducibility, you know, mass production and reproduction, all the cups kind of looking alike, even though what's inside the cups is what gets customized to make people feel you know, valued as customers.
Greenwashing alleged sustainability occurs almost in every section.
Greenwashing, definitely.
I would say corruption.
Can you say one more time?
Corruption.
Production, yeah.
And corruption as well. Production and corruption.
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 Can I ask a question? Because I couldn't quite hear like two people back. And I think it was a really important point, because I was looking at the drawings as we drew them now. And that relation between the status and the specialness with the fact that it's non-local, that there was a connection, like that destruction of the local, which we know is part of the production of waste and the degradation of the planet is related to that same kind of disconnection. I think it related to the other person's point, but I couldn't quite hear. I'm just wondering if there's a key point there that, makes it.
Well, someone mentioned neocolonialism. And I think that's kind of what you're mentioning there when you're talking about that. It's like displacing any local people or local groups who are growing their own coffee and selling it locally. Now there's this big international conglomerate coming in and pushing out the local people.
I got it. Okay.
Also neocolonialism as far as what's happening in Guatemala with the child labor, also Southeast Asia with the palm oil.
I mean, I know I talked a lot about local, but that was more so like the fact that it's not available, like it's seen as an urban coffee shop, but not available in certain urban areas where the population is predominantly BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, or other people of color.
Yeah, definitely.
Organizers, I want to pose a question that's been posed by Nicole from Artways and a few other folks as well, speaking to why is it called an implosion instead of explosion? And if you could just share briefly about this process and what attracted you to it.
Anyone else want to go first? Okay. Well.
I think the original title was pioneered by the academic Donna Haraway. Her original plan, it was the series of questions, but Trash Academy reinterpreted it to be more creative and have this illustrative element so it's easier to visualize the interconnectedness. And I think that was one of the things that really drew Trash Academy to this activity, was having it be both collectively sourced, all of the knowledge is coming from in the room and we're learning and discovering those interconnections together. We're also, Trash Academy is involved in a lot of movement building and action building, and being able to see the interconnectedness between the different systems. It helps us, break out of those silos that we typically work in and see how our activism work is connected to the activism of others. Yeah.
But it also not exactly to the question about Donna Haraway and Implosion. When we were working with folks who are like pissed off about the trash in their neighborhood, and we didn't want to get involved with cleanups. Like, oh no, cleanups are not where it's at. You can clean up till the cows come home and it doesn't address the issue. We were trying to get to systems. So that was another reason why we why we first started using it. And I just found the original article that I had read. And you know what happened? She had a lecture class. She's a great thinker. And she had a lecture class, and they would come in with a cup of coffee, a takeout cup of coffee, and a chocolate croissant. And so part of her practice was to start to get them to understand that the world that we live in is not as it appears. So she called it waking up to connections, but why she called it implosions, I don't know. I'm looking for it right now, but keep going. But that's how she started doing it.
Definitely. I think in the interest of time, it is 4:31. I'm going to stop my screen share, and maybe Margaret, if you wouldn't mind putting up the debrief questions on the screen, just so if folks do have to hop off, if you have the ability to put in the chat the answer to these debrief questions, that would be really helpful for us. And I know that Sepide has something else that they also want to share before we all hop off.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I wanted to share that all recordings of our sessions are available online within a day or so of the sessions happening. So this is information and a space that you can revisit over and over again. I learned so much in addition to being excited by the interactive component. I also want to share, my friends, our upcoming events tomorrow. All right, so the symposium ends on Friday, and tomorrow we actually have 3 different events. We have an event at 3 p.m. 1 p.m. Eastern, titled Water is Life, Reflections from an Environmental and Cultural Emergency. So we have the executive director of the Navajo Water Project. We have an artist in residence in the city of Boston who is working on water and Indigenous art for the Department of Disaster Preparedness, incredibly so. We have the executive director of the Flint Public Art Project, and that conversation is being moderated by Benny Starr, who is a grist fixer this year and artist in residence at the U.S. Water Alliance as well. At 3 p.m., we have a film festival sharing 8 unique mini documentaries made by partners around the country, including Trash Academy and Philly Thrive, based in Philly as well. Really exploring what the environmental justice issues they are tackling are. So you'll hear from Trash Academy again tomorrow if you'd like. And tomorrow at 5:30 for our Art of Activism series, we are tuning in live from East Austin with some of our partners from the Arts and Environmental Justice Capacity Building Initiative, including the Mosaic Workshop and Raisin in the Sun. So we hope we'll see you again tomorrow, or if not, Friday. Thank you.
And thank you from Scotland. It's been amazing. Take care.